I think this mechanism is going to be the future, which means like yay for us because I love correlated pairs and I hate impermanent loss. But yeah, so it's been awesome.
Look at that. Look at that ETH USDC pair.
Oh no, I don't want to do that.
Well, it's just
I don't want to lead anyone to impermanent loss. But yeah,
oh, this is
look at that.
impermanent loss city. But I mean, if you
right.
like,
so you could do at 80% collateral factor, that's 5x leverage. So 30 plus, let's just call this together 50, right? 50% times 5x leverage, looking at 200% APR. But welcome to today's episode of the Dojo Pod. A lot has happened since last week. Argentina launched a coin. Solana's been going through some stuff. Bear Chain launched, I think, like towards the end of our last episode. So there is a ton to talk about. But let's first address maybe the elephant in the room, which is Solana and its path towards recovering from this. I still like Solana DeFi, believe it or not. I know I pivoted sort of at the top. Patrick, you literally, I think, called the local top almost exactly by your metrics. Can you like quickly remind us how you did that and why maybe DeFi Lionel's is so useful?
I didn't call it the day of. I called it maybe a few days to a week after, but I did this publicly on Twitter and YouTube, and I think in the podcast. Basically, DeFi Llama added a new metric called app revenue, which is the sum of the revenue for all applications on a chain. And what I noticed was that this was in January, 3 times in the previous year, app revenue had peaked, had spiked either the same day or within 2 days of a Solana local top. And then we had the same spike with a all-time high on, I think, January 19th or 20th. And so I said, okay, if this holds, we now have 3 times in the past year that this has been the exact predictor of local top, then that's probably a local top too. And plus you have unlocks coming. And so it turned out to be right, for better or worse. And although I'm still a big Solana guy, still putting out some Solana content, I will throw out there that I did call the local top.
It was a great call, and it's super interesting to have some data points so you can kind of correlate to this. I mean, we can see it happen 3 times. I mean, it'd be great if this kind of keeps on popping up as being this indicator that people can touch on. It has just been wild to see kind of like since the start of the year, Solana has just been the center of things that have been going on, good and bad, right? So there's been like the Trump launch, there's been all these massive meme coin launches. I think some people have been kind of pretty cautious and worried about like the longer term impacts of like onboarding all these new people, having all these meme coins, launching and potential dilutive effects. I think, one of the big things that's happened last week is we had this Argentina launch, and with the Argentina launch, it was pretty much just, like straight up and straight down, right? Like we've Steven's here showing like the Donald Trump chart. It had quite a extended period of going up. People were excited. You can look at this chart here. It literally went straight from 0 to 4.5 billion and then straight back down to something like 300 million. And that's why I think like there was just so much anger and attention towards this. And then of course we've had this just like ongoing saga over the last couple of days with this new character called Hayden, who seems to be kind of like one of the orchestrators behind a lot of these meme coins. This one that's even showing here, Melania, apparently, and also Libra, which is the Argentina one. And he just seems to be going on this tear of like interviews. He did an interview with CoffeeZilla. He went on with Dave Portnoy. There's been all sorts of stuff going on. And he's kind of been defending himself or defending meme coin launches. I mean, it's been a little bit tone deaf, maybe, like in terms of just like the way he talks about it and kind of like some of the admissions that he's had. And it feels like he's kind of been dragging into the mud a lot of different people. I personally have not been following it closely enough to kind of do call outs, but there's been people attached to somehow like the LA vape cabal who were kind of like in the limelight for a while there, who seem to be embroiled in this. Dave Portnoy seems to be embroiled in this. The president of Argentina, Javier Milei, who tweeted about it and then deleted it and then tweeted about it again, is embroiled in this. Also different ecosystem projects. So like, it seems like the Meteora team is getting kind of like raked through the mud in this situation as well. And of course, Meteora is, I don't know if you call it an offshoot or a sub-project of Jupiter. So, Jupiter also has kind of been getting quite a bit of flack. But Yeah, I don't know. I'm curious, Patrick, what's your take on all this? You seem to be pretty close to the heartbeat of what's going on in Solana. Is this just another day in the office, or do you think that this is, a different level of kind of scandal that we're seeing?
Yeah, so a couple thoughts on that. First off, I'll say I don't know any of the people that are that are involved in this personally. I've never talked to any of them, as far as I can think of. Don't quote me on that, but yeah, like none of these teams I know. My thought is, I think it's probably the end of the meme coin meta for now. I don't think it's quite as serious as people think it is. Like some people were comparing it to FTX or Luna. Except for maybe in Argentina, I don't think this. My impression is that this is not really making the rounds outside of crypto land, because I mean, it's although it's a lot of money was removed quickly, it's not quite the same scale of like fleecing retail that I'm laughing at these charts. I think it's Steven drawing it, but it's not the same scale as like FTX or Terra, where you had a lot of normal people who were maybe keeping money they considered safe there. At the end of the day, it was a meme coin launch. I mean, I lost a little bit of money on it. I know many other people did, just buying, I think I bought close to the exact top. Whoops. But at the end of the day, I don't think this is going to have like, people are talking about like the media is going to run with it. I think they've got other things they're worried about at this point. So I'm not so worried about that. As far as the effect on the Solana ecosystem itself, we are seeing some modest outflows if you look at the numbers. However, most of the outflow numbers people have been quoting actually preceded the Argentina launch. They were like early last week. So that could be a sign that people were either already starting to become fatigued with meme coin prior to this, or it's just other reasons, maybe related to yield, or I would suspect it's maybe related to people taking stable coins to Berachain to farm, or Sonic, but my guess would be Berachain because of the scale of it. So I don't think it's...
Where do you track inflows and outflows? So I know there's a tool for inflows and outflows on DeFi Llama.
If you go to bridges over on the left,
Bridge TVL or
Bridge TVL is like for layer twos, bridges. You go to overview or chains and see the inflows and outflows.
Okay.
Now this doesn't quite include like stable coins being redeemed and things. You have to look at stable coins for that. What I was looking at is the stable coin supply dropped by nearly over $500 million, at least last I checked. But yeah. So the thing I was thinking about is I've got this, transparently, I have this 101 free YouTube course coming out soon. And it's just like, what is a blockchain? What is DeFi? What is an AMM? How to set up a wallet, etc. And it's being supported by the Solana Foundation. So the course is going to focus on like doing these things on Solana. And after this happened, I thought, should I postpone it? Should I not release it at all? Even though I've already, spent a considerable amount of money on like studio time and editing and stuff. And I thought, no, I'm going to anyways, because there's not really any other chain even today that I would think would make more sense to have someone test out on-chain transactions for the first time on. Ethereum is, frankly, even now, Ethereum mainnet is going to be too expensive for someone who is just testing it out, maybe with like $10, $20. It's going to be too expensive, and that's a substantial portion of people if you're looking at like global audience. Our Ethereum layer 2s, so Base is good. I consider doing it on Base. Problem is that most exchanges you can't withdraw to Base from, so it's basically a Coinbase guide, and that's not available everywhere. Or again, people may use Binance or another exchange as their primary. Arbitrum, it's a little confusing for new people to tell them like you're withdrawing ETH, but you're doing it. You have to select which layer 2 you're withdrawing it to, and depending on the exchange, it's going to be different how you do that. And then the other consideration would be Binance Smart Chain, which is one of the biggest, but again, that's not available on Coinbase. So I was like, at the end of the day, I think Solana is still the easiest to onboard for new people, and so I don't think we've heard the last of it by a long shot.
But what is the next move? So we've talked about this very specific narrative virtually every single podcast, which is Pump Fund was like in the throes of having a bad time. I think we started the podcast probably around the time they were still doing the video. They had just launched the video that was like a flash in the pan week long of how bad can humans get, I think was the question being asked with the video stuff on Pump Fund. And the answer was really bad. So let's shut that down. And I think that was like the peak of Pump Fund, in my opinion. And it was sort of downhill from there. And with Pump Fund tokens, we saw Trump, then we saw Melania, then we saw a bunch of other celebrities before that. And it seems like there is probably some equation that could be done, which is how many minutes do you have to enter after a launch and still be profitable? I think it started off with Trump was like a day. You had like a whole day to go in. And then with Melania, it was like a few hours, which is still decent. And then with Libra, I think it was less than 1 hour you had to enter before it became an unprofitable trade, no matter when you exited. And in my opinion, we saw the same thing last cycle with the Ponzi forks, right? Node forks, Greater Fool's Game, the seniorage thing. So like the Tomb forks was a Greater Fool's Game. Any number of things, right? There were just a bunch of different Greater Fool's Game. Even the food dexes, like the food swaps. The reason why they were Greatest Fool's Game is because they had fees to enter and exit the LPs. I don't know if you remember that, but to deposit and provide liquidity, you're being charged like a 1% fee. So you had to get in there early enough to make that 1% back to be profitable before you exited. And early on, almost anyone could, well, not almost anyone, but it was very easy to be profitable. Like the first 100 users will be profitable. Later on, only the first 20 users will be profitable. And then later on, fewer and fewer and fewer. And we're getting to that critical mass of losers, I think, at this point in the cycle, where pump is going to lose its allure, I think, even for the gamblers, because gamblers want roughly, I think there is a hurdle, right? There's a win rate hurdle. It's probably somewhere around like 10%, which is crazy low for any gambler who's worth his money. I'm not saying you should gamble, don't gamble. But like that is a super low hurdle and a really, really low bar. And I think we're way beneath that. So my assumption is that's going to fade into the distance. And to me, this is an amazing thing because I think Solana DeFi has a lot to offer and it's being completely ignored because of the, hideous monkey in the room throwing poop all over the walls.
I think you're overly optimistic, Stephen. I don't think there's a chance that your average meme coin speculator is getting a 10% win rate. I think we've seen numbers on this and it is way lower. There was a really interesting tweet from OX, not going to make it, from DeFi Llama, like what's kind of like tabulating the different losses or extractive money that's come out of the system. It's not this one. I sent it here on the stream chat if you want to take a look at that, Stephen. But basically what they were saying was trading bots and apps have extracted something a bit over $1 billion. Pump.fun, just in the fees that they have been taking, is, something like close to $500 million. Mev bots, another $1.5 to $2 billion. Trump insiders, $500 million to $1 billion. Other insiders unknown. And so the total for this is somewhere between $3.5 and $6.5 billion, just like taken out of the system. We saw, of course, the Argentina coin was like another great example of this. I think what that has shown, because there was liquidity that was pulled and there was selling that was happening and all sorts of weird and wonderful stuff. I think they pulled out at least 100 million, but probably more. And so, there's been a lot of kind of like doom and gloom on the crypto Twitter timeline talking about how much money is being extracted and kind of throwing blame in a lot of different directions. My personal take on all this is like, I feel like we all kind of knew to some extent how negative and how kind of, like negative sum all this like meme coin stuff was. But I do think like the wool is being pulled from our eyes with some of these like new things that we've been hearing from Hayden, who again was this like person involved in all these different launches, and he's been kind of like, I don't know if it's self-preservation or what it is, but he's been kind of pointing to a lot of other people and teams and saying, KOLs had knowledge, teams had knowledge. And I think you're right, Stephen. I think that like, the lights are coming on at like kind of the disco party rave or whatever it is. And like people are realizing that like it is pretty ugly out there. And, I really hope that Solana can change. I do agree with you, Patrick. It is probably the best environment for like onboarding right now. I do spend quite a bit of time on Solana. I'm more active on ETH and the L2s. But in terms of someone who wanted to start tomorrow interacting with crypto, interacting with DeFi, Solana is probably the place to do it. So I don't know, Stephen, what is, we can probably leave the like meme coin madness story for a little bit now. What's actually like interesting going on in Solana DeFi? Can you give us a little tour?
Like my pride and joy. I mean, not really. I have nothing to do with it. But JLP is down so bad, and like this has been depressing to me because JLP has been typically like almost literally anti-fragile because it benefits from drawdowns. So it benefits from liquidations, it benefits from drawdowns, it benefits from bad traders, benefits from like price appreciation. So it has been a relatively anti-fragile asset until recently, and it's been just really hurting since its peak. Now, granted, Solana price is down, guess like from its absolute peak, it's down 43%, and so if you're measuring, like, would it have been better to hold JLP or would it have been better to hold Solana? Well, JLP is down only 17%. So definitely better to have been holding JLP than Solana during this drawdown, which is why we say JLP is muted volatility, right? You're exposed to blue chips, Bitcoin, ETH, and Solana with muted volatility, but you are still exposed. So it's been painful to see, an asset that I talk about so frequently do, not only be up only, I guess is a way of putting that. So, but still an overall good chart. And if you measure it against Solana itself, it is doing pretty well. Camino, of course, is a place to be leveraging that. But recently I spoke to the Camino team, and they keyed me in on one of these opportunities, which is, by the way, if you think Solana is at a local bottom, there are some strategies where you can benefit from that, doing whatever you want with Solana. So I'm always looking for the coins of an asset and then how to get yield on them. So the coin of Solana chain is Solana. How can you yield on that? Well, Easy Sol, as Renzo's Sol, they're doing an incentives campaign with res, something like 4 million res or something over some period of time, and they plan to renew that. So you get 1.27% additional yield. I don't know what the staking yield is on Solana currently. I think it's 10%, but then you can borrow. You wouldn't borrow Solana against it, obviously. 13.24%, don't do that. But you can borrow Jito Sol against it, and you're paying the intrinsic yield as interest. Anyways, end result ends up being 20% yield on Solana, Easy Sol, and you're getting paid in res emissions. So that's kind of neat in terms of yields. I like that. But then I was actually going to ask you, Mara, what? I've looked at Meteora probably 10 times, and I still don't fully understand what's going on over there. Can you explain Meteora to me like I'm 5?
Yeah. I use Meteora a ton. Whenever I dabble in meme coins, I tend to LP them, which can definitely be for better or worse, right? Sometimes you can get absolutely wrecked on this, and sometimes, it can be great. In terms of it is very similar to that. But I think that Meteora may have been the ones that came up with it first, though I'm not 100% sure on that. But yeah, basically it's concentrated liquidity. And when you set up a concentrated liquidity position, it's kind of much more dynamic than it would be on Uniswap V3 or something. And what that means is, one, you have on the left side there, it gives kind of the parameters. So for example, yeah. So if you look on the left-hand side there, it tells you a couple of parameters. One is what's the base fee that trading's happening on, right? And so first of all, you're having this is a very low kind of normal fee that's going on. But then the fees can, based off of volatility, change very dramatically. So as Steven is very excitedly pointing out there, it can go up to 10%. So you can have in very high volume, high volatility days, a ton of fees that can come in through this. It also does show, of course, there that there is a protocol fee, and the current dynamic fee is actually much lower. So it ends up being closer to 10 bips. But the other really cool thing is when you set up a position, you can choose your kind of shape of the liquidity. So as Steven's pointing out there, there's kind of just the general spot curve that you can have, which is just the same amount of liquidity spread out over the different kind of bins and that are there. Each bin is basically just a limit order almost of the price in which you're providing liquidity for. And then you have curves, curve one and mid one, and these are just the amount of the two different assets that you're putting in each of the buckets. But the thing that I like especially is that it breaks up your position. So normally when you create a concentrated liquidity position on Uniswap, it just puts all of your liquidity within a range. And so, if you have a position like that, in the early part of the curve, the lower price ranges, you're selling, relatively speaking, quite a large amount of your quote asset for a lower price, right? And you can experience quite a bit of impermanent loss because of that. And so what Meteora does, it breaks up each of the positions. And so you can have different amounts of liquidity within basically many different concentrated liquidity positions. So instead of having one concentrated liquidity position, you can have 5, 10. I mean, you can have as many as you want, right? And that means that in each of these small positions, you can have very extreme impermanent loss, but as a overall whole position, you're actually experiencing less impermanent loss. So I like that. It helps with super volatile assets. It does mean that you have less liquidity in range at any one given time, but also less impermanent loss, but also you tend to be very tight within those positions. You can easily move liquidity in between the different bins. If you think that price is ranging within a certain place, you can compound, into certain positions if you want to. They also, for meme coins, have had all of this, now you can create a position like this and then burn the receipt token, but still compound or still earn fees. Anyway, I think the tech-wise, it's very good. I think, the reputation this week has taken a bit of a hit because it seems like they have been involved in some of these meme coin stuff, but tech-wise, it's probably my favorite concentrated liquidity platform that I've been messing around with recently.
So let's talk about this. One, I love this. I think, who was it? Maverick on mainnet. I don't know how Maverick's been doing. I haven't heard about them a lot. They were supposed to be like the game changer of EVM concentrated liquidity. I'm pretty sure Uniswap's just going to end up doing that again. But this is awesome. I have said, or at least it has been said, I don't take credit for this, that being able to express your thesis on chain as accurately as possible is one of the goals of financial DeFi specifically. And this allows you to do that because you can have these very, very specific structures that you can't do with traditional Uniswap V3. So with V2 liquidity, right, full range from 0 to infinity, and it's great. You have minimized impermanent loss, but your capital is hyper inefficient, right? You might have like just a couple of dollars in the range, actively getting swap fees. Then you have V3, which is, let's just say you're on ETH. ETH is currently trading at, 2,600, and your range is from 2,400 to 2,800. Each tick, right? It's effectively like a limit order. Each different tick is going to be the exact same size. It's cool. It's great. You're concentrated, so you're getting like a levered exposure to the fees, but you can't really express anything more than I just want, to provide liquidity in this range. With this, you can be way more expressive, right? So here, by the way, we have no affiliation with Meteora. I just, it's easy to nerd out about cool stuff. Here, you can say, well, you know what? I want to maximize my fees. So I want more liquidity closer to where the spot price is. So if it bounces around around that spot price, I'm just getting more fees relative to my initial position. That's awesome. Now, one thing that we were talking about sort of before the show was like, how important are the macro narratives? How important is it that Meteora may have been associated with Libra? How important is it that Meteora may have, ties to any of this stuff? My opinion is that it's not. People are going to use Meteora because it's a good product, regardless of the sort of macro narratives. Like, I don't know the Meteora people. If the CEO of McDonald's, let's not get into that. But my point being is that I am unconvinced that the macro narratives are that important. But it's like the actual usability for DeFi farmers, because who's using Meteora? Is it people who really believe in like the CEO and the founder, or is it people who want to go CLP, meme coins, JLP versus Solana, Sol USDC? My assumption is it's the latter.
Yeah. And I mean, in this pool you were just on, which has been one of my favorites, actually, it has amazingly great APR. If you look at that, the top one there, which is the lowest fee tier, has $1.7 million of liquidity. It's had almost $45 million of volume, which means it's made on average 1% today. Not 1%, over a week or a month or whatever. That's 1% today, per day. So you're talking about 365% plus APR on a pretty great pair there. So it is very interesting.
Overwhelmed trying to manage your crypto and DeFi investments? Try iYield, a free financial planning tool for crypto natives and yield farmers. iYield reveals your full financial picture by also supporting debts, incomes, and expenses in both crypto and fiat. iYield supports a growing list of over 16,000 tokens in 40 of the top DeFi and staking protocols across 17 blockchains, including Ethereum L2s. The best part is that it is 100% free, anonymous, and there are no ads. Check out iYield.com to take control of your financial future today.
Yeah. So right now the base fee, this pool, so there's different versions of it. You can choose which base fee you want. So you can have this one, you can have other base fees. This one is 4 bips. And then if you go, so there's a 20 bip and a 10 bip. The 4 bip one, if you just go back to that for a second, you can see if you scroll down a little bit, it tells you what the dynamic fee is. So that's like about the 5th thing down. So it's another 4 bips. So in total, it's about an 8%, fee bip pool. And so, depending on volatility and like, I actually don't know the math of how they calculate this. It can go from this like 4 bips of additional dynamic fees all the way up to 10%, depending on kind of like how volatile things are. The other protocol I would just want to like point out, since we're talking about concentrated liquidity and like new innovations in DEXs, I just sent you a link, another DeFi Llama link. Shout out to the DeFi Llama boys, best data dashboards in DeFi in my opinion. But this is on Fluid. Fluid also, that's on kind of like the east side. They've been really crushing it. They have a very different kind of like model. Oh, nice. Yeah, this one, well, maybe you can, I'll set you up here. But I mean, basically, for those that are unfamiliar, Fluid, which formerly known as Insidap, great protocol. They have really been innovating, doing some interesting stuff. Basically, what they have been doing now is they have turned their money market into being a DEX, essentially. It's not a traditional DEX in the sense of like, you can't go and like click, swap, buy, sell, or anything like that. You can't even, in a traditional sense, go and provide liquidity. What you are doing instead is it's a money market where you're borrowing one asset against another one. And so they've implemented these really interesting principle of smart debt and smart collateral. And what that means is if it's smart collateral, you have two assets that are paired against one another. In most cases, these are like for like assets. So like Delta One, so you might have like wrapped Bitcoin with Coinbase Bitcoin, or you might have like wrapped staked ETH with ETH, or I don't know, fill in the blank kind of other pair. And so basically between your collateral, there's swapping that's happening. And now on the debt side, it's the exact same. You can have two different assets, basically like an LP that's paired against one another. And so it's kind of complicated, but like both your debt and your collateral, if you're using smart debt, smart collateral, can be swapped in between the two of them. And so you're seeing like a lot of volume going through these pairs. It's turning kind of a lot of assets, to be very productive, which is, I think, very interesting. It does have some issues with impermanent loss. Like I will say, like their system is not perfect yet in that, like, if there's a depeg of an asset, you can be affected by that. You can't decide on your own what like concentration you want to have or the ranges you want to set. I think that's done by the team now. So it's not a perfect system yet, but I do think it is a truly interesting, new primitive, new way of doing this that not a lot of other people have done and seems to be very effective and routing a lot of volume. Patrick, do you want to just kind of give us a little bit of a breakdown on this?
Yeah, so I'm actually less familiar with the protocol itself than you are, but what jumped out to me was I saw, what brought my attention to it was I saw an account known as DeFi Made Here tweeted out that actually Fluid was, I guess it was the leading pool for USDC over some time period. And so I pulled up the volume charts on DeFi and saw that indeed Fluid is now the number 2 DEX on Ethereum by volume. Yeah, so which is crazy because that's like ahead of Curve, ahead of Balancer, ahead of some very, very old projects.
It's pretty amazing. So just to be clear, DeFi Made Here, I think he is part of the Fluid team. I'm not sure exactly his role there.
Oh, is he?
Yeah, but really what they are doing is super interesting, and like the APRs and some of these things can be pretty phenomenal, like because you're providing liquidity both as your collateral and as your debt, you're earning swap fees, and as long as those swap fees are exceeding the cost that you're paying to borrow, you can get some pretty high APRs, especially since they have just pretty incredible leverage. So I think in some of these cases you can get up to like a 93, at least in the 90% LTVs, which means you're getting, like at least 15x leverage. In some cases, I think you can get up to even 20x leverage. And so if you are arbitraging a difference of, even a percent times leverage, and you have that on both your debt and your collateral, and it's at, say, 20x leverage, 1% arbitrage can turn into a very juicy kind of APR on a lot of these things. So I don't know, Stephen, what's your thought? Have you played around much with smart debt and smart collateral?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've looked at this before, and we've looked at some very specific pools before, and I've done some math publicly on this. Now, let's see, trading APR, that's a positive. So like here, I don't know if there's any room in this one. Yeah, DEX limit reached. So you can't enter this one. But just like thinking about this on a theoretical level, the net APR for providing this smart collateral of wrapped Bitcoin, CB, BTC is 3.67%. So that's like swap fees plus any, I don't know, that's only swap fees, I imagine. Yeah, trading APR. Oh no, there's also like collateral tokens have APR. Anyways, there's APR that cumulatively on the collateral adds up to 3.67%. Okay, cool. Fantastic. Now, the trading fees that you're getting on your collateral, you're also getting on your debt because smart debt also accumulates trading fees. All of that together is you're getting 1.08%. The net cost to borrow this is negative 2.11%. So you're getting paid to borrow. So you're getting paid to collateralize, you're getting paid to borrow, and it's at 95% collateral factor. Those who have followed me for a long time and may also be mentally ill would know that a 95% collateral factor means 20x leverage. And so 20x leverage on an arbitrage of, let's call it 4%, let's be conservative. That's 4% times 20x leverage. So that's 80%, right? That's 80%.
It's actually, I'm in this position. This is one of my favorite positions, and I've been in this for a very long time, and it has been phenomenal. I can tell you that I'm just open my computer, I'm looking at it. I am not quite at max leverage here, and I'm getting 105 APR on this. And it's been like that for months. I mean, it really has been one of the best positions. I say this a little bit selfishly because it is full. Like, you can't get into this position right now. It is also being subsidized in Fluid tokens. So like, this would not be so high if there wasn't kind of that subsidy. But it is a great example of like how efficient this can be, you know, in terms of like arbitraging just small differences in like, you know, the APRs that are being given, the incentives that are being given, and then just borrow costs. And
this might be like an example of a tiny arbitrage. So here there's an arbitrage. An arbitrage, by the way, guys, is just a fancy word for difference. There's a difference of 6 bips. And for those who don't know what a bip is, it's just like 0.01%. So there's a difference of 0.06% between the net, the collateral yield and the debt yield, which means you get that times leverage. Again, 20x leverage times 6 bips. Quick math, it's it's not a lot. So like 1.2% additional. So you're going to be getting, you know, like 4% on your wrap stake ETH, which isn't bad, but you can definitely do better elsewhere. But the idea that you can get yield on your debt is a relatively novel one. You know, before we've seen some protocols do this in a very cheap and easy way, which is like, we're just going to throw tokens at you for borrowing. And Fluid is kind of doing that with the Wrap Bitcoin pair, but there have been other pairs historically which have done really well because their yield from swap fees has exceeded, or at least dramatically mitigated, the cost to borrow. And I do think that this mechanism, well, one, I know a lot of other lending protocols that have kind of been like thinking, hey, we need to build this, we need to build our own version of this, and we need to see how we can optimize on it. So I think this mechanism is going to be the future, which means like, yay for us, because I love correlated pairs and I hate impermanent loss. But yeah, so it's been awesome.
Look at that ETH USDC pair.
Oh no, I don't want to do that.
Well, it's just,
I don't want to lead anyone to impermanent loss. But
yeah, this is, you know, impermanent loss city. But I mean, if you,
right. Like, so you could do at 80% collateral factor, that's 5x leverage. So 30 plus, let's just call this together 50, right? 50% times 5x leverage, looking at 200% APR, but you are exposed to impermanent loss because, and we don't need to get like super into the weeds here, but the way it works is your collateral works typically, right? Your impermanent loss is just as you would expect it. As the price of one asset goes up, you end up being less exposed to it in your collateral. It's the inverse for your debt. So if ETH goes up, typically in a CLP that you were exposed to, you'd have less ETH in, yes, and that's right. And then, yes, you have less ETH that you're exposed to as your long. Now with the debt, it's like kind of the inverse. You're more exposed to ETH debt, right? So now you owe more ETH. So they're not like 1-to-1 correlated. They're 1 to -1. So you do have to keep that in mind. You know, borrowing the smart debt against a smart collateral is not a delta 1 position. You do have some exposure to this sort of wonky impermanent loss mechanism. So, you know that. But yeah, I mean, it is a cool way to leverage up CLPs that we certainly haven't seen elsewhere with a similar enough delta exposure to be kind of interesting.
Yep. So those are the two, in my opinion, most interesting dexes that are out right now, or just like iterating on how to shape and express concentrated liquidity. And Fluid just feels like a new primitive, like way more capital efficiency, which can lead to risks, as you said, impermanent loss, deep X. There are issues.
Should we talk about Parachain?
Yeah, let's talk about Kodiak. Yep.
All right, let's get stupid for a little bit. You can see my little position over on Parachain. We talked about the whole last thing we talked about Parachain. By the way, sorry to Patrick because his audio didn't work, so I literally had to cut him out of the entire podcast last episode.
Wait, really?
Yeah, really. Like you didn't. When you rejoined, I remember you had like some video issue. When you rejoined, it didn't record your video. So there were like sometimes where you're asking a question and then
you know what? It took like forever to upload. I waited for it to upload, but it took like 2 hours. So maybe.
Oh, I probably sent it off to my editor prior to it finishing uploading. I was like, where is he? Like, why isn't Patrick anywhere in this video?
I don't. Something was going on with my computer. Anyways, well, bummer. Anyways.
Yes. So hopefully it doesn't happen this time. But so we talked about IBGT, the way it works. It's been kind of pretty fascinating. One thing that I didn't immediately know, and I should have, bad on me, is that when you stake your IBGT, you're getting paid in honey. Like, and for those of you who don't know, honey is a stablecoin. It's a fully backed stablecoin, just like USDC or USDT, except I believe it's backed by those assets. Mara, you may know better, but effectively it's a fully backed stablecoin. That's what you need to know. You're getting paid in that. Now, how is that possible? How is it possible to get, 150% APR paid in stablecoins? Well, That's all coming from Beex fees. Beex is one of the dexes on Bearchain. I wouldn't say it's the most popular dex. Kodiak is the most popular dex, but it's like it was the dex chosen for the initialization of like BGT emissions, I suppose is one way you can put it. So all of the fees on Beex, all of them, as far as I understand, I'm pretty sure it's 100%, are being sold into Honey and then distributed to BGT stakers. Now, Mara, am I getting that right?
So yeah, a few things. One, Honey is the native stablecoin of Bearchain. It's basically just, like USDC. I think that there's also USDT in there, but it's basically just like the native stablecoin. You can mint it and you can redeem it. It's had a very strong peg recently just because of that. Beex is the native DEX of Bearchain, so it's kind of like inherent in the protocol. It's not going to always be the one that's getting BGT emissions, but it is the one that's getting them right now because there's only 5 pools. And yeah, I mean, so, and in terms of like the IBGT stuff, that's just what Infrared is doing. So Infrared is taking all of the swap fees portion of this, and then it is selling those swap fees into Honey and then distributing them. If you go with something like Stride or you're doing it just yourself, you just actually get the fees. So, that is like one differentiation. Yeah. And then, but for, just to like kind of go back to Beex, some of these APRs are pretty juicy and you can kind of stack them on top of one another. So if people are not looking to have, exposure to price, the bottom 2 there that have APRs. And so these are ones, this is like the first 5 pools that proof of liquidity is working with. And so like there are these emissions that are coming through Bearchain that are being directed towards this. So there's Honey USDC. So that's basically just USDC and wrapped USDC essentially, and you're getting 22% APR at size. So there's like $38 million in there. So this is not just something that can, unless something to come in with tens of millions of dollars, come in instantly dilutes. You have above that Honey with BYUSD. So that's like the PayPal stablecoin, but it's the Bearchain version of it. And that's getting just under 30% APR with $170 million that's being supported there. So if you don't want price, exposure to volatile assets, those are pretty juicy stablecoin yields, arguably some of the best that are out there right now, I think. And then if you do want, Bearchain exposure or ETH or, whatever, you can do some of the ones above, which are offering triple-digit APRs. So you can take these assets, these LP tokens, I should say, and then you can go and you can do a few different things with them. One, you can just go and you can stake it yourself and you can just earn BGT. BGT, just as a reminder for everyone, is kind of like the soul-bound, I think that's the right term for it, token, which gives you like voting power in the Bearchain system. So you can go do that, and then you can go and delegate your own BGT to one of like the validators and earn rewards that way. Or you can use what I'm calling like liquid lockers for it. I guess they're like technically LSTs, but like these protocols are building on top of proof of liquidity. And the 2 main ones are Infrared, which is kind of like this native protocol just focused on Bearchain. They have $1 billion in TVL. A lot of that's come from a 1.25 billion, TVL. And a lot of that's come from Boyko. A lot of that's come from people speculating that Infrared might be one of the big winners when it comes to the proof of liquidity system. And so basically what you do is you deposit your LP token. They then give you, instead of this soul-bound version of BGT, they're giving you a liquid staked version of it. So it's still like they're holding the BGT. They're giving you this liquid version of it. And then there's some different stuff you can go do. You can go LP it. You can go stake it, as Steven was saying, for about like 140% APR. You can just sell it if you want to and just kind of like compound your position. So there's a lot of interesting stuff that's going on there. Stride is the same. Stride is, of course, not native to Bearchain. They're the kind of like Cosmos liquid staking platform, though they're making this like big push. It's the same system. In Bearchain, you go and stake your LP token. You're getting these like APRs paid out to you in STBGT. And again, you can kind of go and LP that and earn additional rewards. They're giving out $200,000 of USDC over hopefully about 75 days, although it may end up being a bit longer depending on how proof of liquidity works. So you can kind of really start stacking these yields pretty aggressively. And I do think, especially for stablecoins, but even if you want to have just Bearchain exposure, this is probably the game that you want to be playing at the moment.
Excellent explanation. One thing I wanted to just say as a point of fun is that when you are yielding IBGT on, let's just say, stablecoins, you can then take that IBGT and then stake it for more stablecoins. So it's an interesting feedback loop of getting 150% paid in stablecoins on your emissions from your stablecoin farm. Stablecoins, IBGT, more stablecoins. et cetera, et cetera. So it's a fun way to compound because it gives you an extra step. And I've been talking in the dojo recently about like a fun premium that I put on protocols where if yields are equal, I would prefer to use the fun protocol, even if the yield is like slightly less. That's, there's like a hurdle for me where I will go and do the thing that is less good, less beneficial, just for fun. Like, for example, right now, Berachain, or Bera, I'm effectively farming IBGT, BGT. It has pretty good APRs. It's been like thousands of percents recently. Now it's down to like hundreds of percents, which is great. Maybe less than 100% now. You can literally just long Bera on Hyperliquid for like 95%. But that's boring to me. It's like not very fun if you use leveraging liquidated. It's not as exciting. The LPing process, finding the right range, doing all that stuff, like there's this fun premium that I actually enjoy playing with, and it's drawn me over there. So one thing I do want to mention,
there's also this interesting game you can play with. So just to clarify, BGT is essentially the same thing as Bera, except it's like this locked version of it that participates in the governance. But you can always unwrap a BGT for one Bera token. So when you see IBGT paying 150% in stablecoins, or if you're Steven and you're going and LPing Bera tokens against IBGT or Bera against STBGT, if you can find a cheap place to short Bera, there's a very interesting delta neutral play where you're getting paid 150% on one side and then you're delta neutral on the other side. Now, I will say that the funding rates for Berachain have been very expensive. And so doing it on Hyperliquid, doing it on all of these places is not economical. You're actually losing money. But as Steven's about to point out here, there is another way that you can kind of play this game using Dolomite, which is the biggest money market on Berachain and is a very kind of new and deep liquidity that you can interact with.
Yeah, and technically, go ahead, Patrick.
Just hold on, quick question. So you can unwrap BGT. I know we've gone over this. I just want to make sure I understand. You cannot unwrap BGT.
You can redeem BGT for Bera. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's like unwrapping. Yeah, you can redeem BGT for Bera.
Okay, you redeem it, but there's no way to go in reverse. You can only farm.
Correct.
BGT.
Yes.
Okay. So,
but you can buy it. It's been overpegged, right? So at some points it was like 5x.
You can't buy BGT. You can buy IBGT or STBGT.
Yes.
Right.
You can buy IBGT or STBGT. You can't buy BGT itself. If it's just in its most pure form, it's attached to your wallet, and the only thing you can do is burn it and then receive Berachain. You can farm it, and you can farm the liquid staking version of it. You can farm, STBGT or IBGT, and so that's how you get the liquid representation of it. And if you are holding IBGT and then go stake it, that's when you're earning that 150%. So if you can find a way to short Bera and then go delta neutral on Bera, you can just be earning 150% APR without having exposure to the price. Now, I'm personally long Bera and bullish on Bera, so I'm not doing this delta neutral. But if someone was, Steven, will you just show us theoretically how someone could go delta neutral Bera?
Before I do that, Patrick, did you have any other questions? I know we get kind of excited and true happy.
No, it's good. No, I'm thinking about some, I was thinking about the implications of as the chain grows, what ought to happen to that BGT yield, but continue. Well, will it get diluted, or will it, if say Berachain, the entire on-chain ecosystem 10x's, and will the increased activity mean you're earning more stable coins from your BGT?
I think so, because also the whole bribing system hasn't gotten kicked in yet. So basically what's happening is, right, like the infrared positions, which is that 150% APR that we're talking about, where that comes from is the swap fees that are coming from Beex, which is like the native DEX of Berachain. It's just those swap fees that are going towards that. They're selling the Bera, the ETH, the Bitcoin, the whatever other assets that are being generated. They're selling those things into Honey and then distributing it. Now, it's just because there are not very many people that are staking their IBGT. That's why it's 150%. So as more people stake their IBGT, it will go down. But we're also waiting for the bribe ecosystem to come through. So eventually what's going to happen is people will be bribing for emissions. So you'll have someone like, I don't know, maybe it's Dolomite, maybe it's Kodiak, maybe it's EtherFi, maybe it's whichever protocol that wants to have an APR on their asset. They are going to go and bribe validators. Now, of course, Infrared and Stride have their own sets of validators. We'll go and bribe those people to provide the incentives. And so it will be those bribes that are then paid out to BGT holders. Now, do I think it will always be 150%? No. But do I think that it's just a 1-to-1 dilute to zero over time? Probably not as well, because there will be a massive demand for these emissions over time, especially if, bear chain appreciates and like, the incentives that are being distributed are pretty substantial.
Do you know what yield layer ETH is? Yield layer staked ETH? So it's CN. Okay. Good for them. Good for them for still being around. That's great. So there appears to be a CN yield layer ETH, which is a wrapped version of ETH, getting something like 14% on collateral. Now, I don't know. Where can I look at the numbers here? Liquidation threshold, 86%? That's incredible, actually. That's a really, really high liquidation threshold. So you could, theoretically, I don't know what the liquidity looks like here, by the way, guys, so don't super quote me on this, but you could get some of this yield layer staked ETH. I don't know how consistent the yield is either, so don't come after me, do your own research, but it's 14% to collateralize this let's just say you do 80% LTV, so 5x leverage on 14%. And the borrow cost on ETH, this is kind of crazy, guys. The borrow cost on ETH is 25 bips. Why is that? Well, you should know, right? You should know why that is. Boyko brought in $400 million to Dolomite, right, of just lend side liquidity. And people are not realizing this and not going over there and not farming this. So you have these incredibly low borrow costs. EBTC, 1 bip, LBTC, 1 bip, less than 1 bip, wrap Bitcoin, 2 bips, right? And then you have some of these yield-bearing assets, yield layer, BTC, LST. I don't fully understand this one, but 3%, right? Collateral, APR. You can leverage this against wrap Bitcoin and get like probably a 12, 13% yield on your Bitcoin, a maybe 50% yield on your ETH by doing the other one. Even if you just want to take something like Kelp ETH, maybe you've seen some of the Kelp updates and you're so bullish on season 2. Who knows, right? That's up to you. Live your life. 3.23% plus points on the collateral. Let's see what we're looking at. 50% liquidation threshold. Okay, so you really can't leverage that much, but you could, borrow a little bit of ETH against that and then leverage. So what I'm saying is people are really fading the impact of Boyko. Boyko has made the cheapest borrow rates in all of DeFi for leverage stake loopers existent on Barachain. And so that's the kind of exciting stuff for me. Hopefully soon we get some strategies where you can like loop these things. It's like, yeah, they exist. So that's kind of cool. These are for those of you who don't want to think or don't really want to do any work, you can literally just like one click loop into these things. Can I sort by highest APR? That's not exactly right, but yeah, Barachain. Okay, looks like they only have Luke SUSD right now. They don't have any of the other ones that might be spicy for me, but that's still pretty cool.
No, that's great. I think, so what else do we have? I think we covered Barachain. This is an interesting one. I don't know if you heard about this, Patrick. So basically on the Gnosis chain, they are onboarding, what is it? So it's the S&P 500. It's like an ETF of the S&P 500 that they are, a tokenized version of it is being onboarded to Aave. So you will be able to deposit this S&P 500 index and then borrow against it. This is one thing that I'm excited about. Like I would love to see kind of more of these tokenized ETFs, tokenized stocks on chain, and then kind of get plugged into the DeFi Lego blocks that we have so that you can go say collateralize, some of these safer, less volatile assets, borrow stable coins against them, do different looping strategies, do ETH strategies, do BTC strategies. I think it's pretty interesting. I think it could be a massive unlock. I have heard that this specific version of this asset does have relatively high fees, like something like, like 50 bips or something like that, which probably makes it untenable for this specific asset to interact with. But hopefully we're going to see Ondo and we're going to see BlackRock do this at a much larger scale with much lower fees. And if that happens, I think this could be a massive unlock for DeFi. But yeah, curious to hear what you guys' thoughts are on this, on TradFi coming to DeFi.
A couple thoughts on this. So first off, I'll say, I think Gnosis runs under the radar a lot. They've done a ton to build tools for stablecoins, payments, tokenized RWAs. I mean, Gnosis Pay is one of we can't have it in the US. My understanding from people I know who have it is that it's one of the most seamless ways to actually pay with a card using on-chain funds. So Gnosis has been doing that. So I think it's interesting to see them now doing this with equities. As far as the potential of this, I think bringing equities on-chain in a meaningful way. But what I said recently was the assets that have reached escape velocity as far as digital assets goes is Bitcoin, stable coins. You may argue ETH as well. I know you two would probably argue ETH, but you may argue ETH. But I would say Bitcoin and stablecoins have 100% reached escape velocity. ETH probably like 90%. If you could reach escape velocity with tokenized equities as well, then that opens up tens of trillions of dollars of total addressable market that crypto and DeFi could apply to. So good first step. Let's see if there's any demand for it. In the past, there hasn't truthfully not been a ton of demand for tokenized stocks, but maybe the time has finally come in 2025.
Steven, you're a bit of an on-chain maxi. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think you dabble a ton in traditional stonks. But if we did see these kind of things, if we saw, major index funds coming on chain, I don't know, maybe there's stocks that you're interested in, like Coin or something like that. I'm not sure what it is actually you're interested in. Would you dabble? Is this something that has any appeal to you? Or is it kind of like Euro stablecoins where you see them there, or gold stablecoins where you see them there, but you don't actually kind of really have a reason to play around with them? You're muted.
This is the reason I'd play around with it, is what I was saying. Because number go up pretty consistently over a long time horizon. So I like the idea of being able to leverage the S&P 500. I like the idea of being able to pair trade with different stocks and being able to do what I would otherwise do on like Tasty Trade or Webull or Robinhood or whoever you're using. Being able to do all of that stuff on chain instead. And even potentially, if there's a way to do it, being able to trade these things after hours, being able to take positions or bets like during the weekend, where historically markets have been, I don't want to say manipulated, but big events that would be adverse to the markets have happened on weekends where nobody but people who are trading behind the scenes in OTC have the capacity to play those. So I would love to see all this stuff come on chain, and I would like to see like traditional finance in general become more of like a 24/7 arena. Now, is that bad maybe for like traders' mentality, psychology, and like livelihood? I don't know. They're probably thinking about this stuff anyways. But yeah, I mean, look at this asset and tell me you wouldn't want to do stuff with it, to have a composable version of it. I know I said that about JLP, and JLP's been riding the struggle bus, and that's true. But like it's the S&P 500, which is historically just been an absolute powerhouse for a very, very long time. I think like its longest rough period, right, was back in 2000. Yeah, it lost like 50% over like a year and a half. And then again for like 2008, it lost 50% over a year. And then up only, even COVID, barely even had that serious of a drawdown. And then of course quantitative easing came in, and then boom, up only. Now, yeah, so definitely would like to see these things come on chain, if for no other reason than to address a new audience. So imagine we have this new audience, SPY maxis, or like S&P 500 index fund maxis, who can now do their hedge fund stuff, who can now do their like retirement investments and like Aave. So they can lend their stocks, they can borrow against it. Yes, you can already do this with your broker, but a lot of brokers have like minimum requirements. You have to have this big of a size to borrow against your whatever. You have to pay us this fee. You have to interact with us directly. It is permissioned. It is not permissionless. It is you have to trust us to like hold or custody your assets or whatever. Now, there is some degree of trust in like Aave as an example, but the borrowing itself is permissionless. And I just think that's phenomenal. And oftentimes you can get really good rates to borrow on Aave. So yeah, I mean, I am nothing but stoked for innovations like this. And I hope that they work and that they get adopted. We saw this with Mirror back in UST days, and it was kind of cool. People were kind of talking about it, and like we saw some composability. But then UST died, and we lost a lot of the innovations that we were working towards from that chain.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's a lot of doom and gloom out there. I do think that, ending on like the positive note of some of these interesting tokenized things that are happening here, there also have been, just as a couple like quick headlines, other interesting stuff that are positive that are happening in the market. So for example, we got confirmation that there are some sovereigns who are buying Bitcoin. So like the Abu Dhabi Sovereign Wealth Fund, for example, bought $463 million of Bitcoin in Q1. It seems like that myth or that, thing that had been said a lot about, needing ETFs to allow kind of like really big players to come in is true, right? People don't want to deal with custody. They don't want to deal with being hacked. They don't want to have to deal with, new trading venues. And so that's been pretty interesting to see that we're actually seeing sovereign wealth coming in and playing in our game. Another one, just like a quick headline that, has been getting some people excited is that there's been a proposal by Grayscale and some of these other folks to have staking for Ethereum ETFs. So like that's another kind of like piece of hopium that I think a lot of people have been excited about. Hopefully some of these institutions that are allocating to crypto for the first time will see a staking yield, really like, kind of like income to come from their assets to get, paid for it. And so maybe that will be an exciting thing as well. And then the last one is the Trump Media Group apparently is been approved for buying crypto assets. So not only is Mr. Trump YOLOing ETH and Bitcoin and other stuff with World Liberty Financial, it sounds like they're going to start being a trading venue with stuff like Truth Social and some of the other outreach they have for crypto as well. So it might be a new exchange that can onboard lots of people. So anyway, it's been a bit of a tough week. And so I thought we should just end on a few pieces of hopium, a few pieces, kind of glimmers of interesting and exciting stuff that may save all of our bags in the months to come.
Always muted. Well, yes, thank you for the good news, and thank you guys for watching. And as always, have a wonderful rest of your day.